Now going to celebrate a great friend of all of us at the table, recently disappeared. That was a great master in perfumery, that is Sandrine Videault. And first of all, you know the book we speak before was exactly dedicated to Sandrine. And if you open the first page, you will see that the dedica is for Sandrine. A lot of people don't know Sandrine, and so I think the best tribute to give her is to let people that met her, that have a chance to share with her some dreams, I used to say, dreams and projects, and the energy in that wonderful lady was magic, and all of us miss her. So I would like that to give to Michael the words now, and a toast to Sandrine, because really we miss her.
Thank you very much, Silvio. For me, it's a privilege to be here. But I think before we start speaking, maybe we need to remind ourselves of what Sandrine actually accomplished. Afterwards, I will say a few words about my association with Sandrine, and then I'm going to ask Saskia, Havekes, who worked with Sandrine on her last composition, Grandiflora Magnolia there. We have two distinguished journalists who knew Sandrine joining us as well, the authors of Parfum Rare, Sabine, whom you know, and Laurence Férat. Sabine was the ancien editor of Cosmetic News International. We've probably forgotten more than I think I'll know about much of the fragrance industry. She's probably interviewed everybody. Currently is the soul of the French Fragrance Foundation in France. And Laurence Férat, distinguished journalist, freelance journalist, works for Le Figaro, many other magazines, and specializes in the fragrance field. And finally, I'm going to ask Silvio to sum up his association. This is a very personal thing today. This is no lecture. And if there's any question you want to ask us, it'll be a pleasure. I wonder if we could just show briefly the review of Sandrine's work. Would you be kind enough to show the tribute? Thank you. She was not a perfumer in the regular sense. She was far wider in many ways. She was an installation artist, as you'll see the kind of work. 92, 96, Edmund Rudnitsky's last student. I don't have any button. Oh, please, yeah, thank you. Next one, please. Next one, please. Thank you. This will give you an idea of the range of the work that she had. Okay? 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 By any standards, it's an incredible array of material, and so different from the usual prosaic creations for various brands. I first really became aware of Sandrine's work when she created for Launay, Mamma Moulière, in 2009. I wasn't aware of much of her other installation or artistic work. Gradually I came to know it. But I started working far more closely with her about 3 years ago when Saskia Havekes, started speaking to me about the creation of a fragrance. Saskia is from Sydney. She runs one of the world's great florist shops. Imagination, you wouldn't believe the art of flowers taken to an extreme, costly, unusual, funny, different kind of flowers there. And Saskia had the idea that she wanted to create a perfume inspired by the Magnolia grandiflora, which is the signature there. It had never been done before, funnily enough, and Saskia asked my opinion as to perfumers that she could approach. I had two in mind, both women, because I felt that this was an approach that needed a feminine touch, woman to woman. One of them was Sandrine. The advantage is that Sandrine lived in New Caledonia, which is about an hour and a half away from Sydney. And Saskia invited Sandrine to come and met her. And it was clear that the two of them clicked immediately on that kind of thing, and I'm going to ask Saskia to talk in a little more detail about that. I was no client. This was not a consultancy or anything else like that. It was really a favour to an old friend whom I admire. But at the same time, I felt a little bit responsible for helping Saskia develop the project, and so I started working with Sandrine. And that was a very interesting start, because we come from two different areas. I rapidly realized that Sandrine has never worked with an evaluator, and so the idea of having somebody actually providing any critique or saying, oh, I think that's not quite the way you ought to go, was an unusual kind of approach to start with there. And she was a fiery woman at times, with a fiery temper, and sometimes I was at the wrong end of that one there. But at the same time, we had a different philosophy. You know, for me, perfume started in 1889 with Jiki, because for me, Jiki was that meld. It was a new experience, the new synthetic molecules tied to natural materials. I'm an admirer of naturals, but I guess my philosophy always said for great perfume, a great perfume has a body of fine naturals on a skeleton of innovative synthetic notes. This was totally different from what Sandrine believed. Sandrine was a believer in naturals. She loved naturals. She almost found synthetic notes strange, disliked them, would be reluctant to use them, whereas at times I would say, oh, why don't we put some musk in, smooth it out. This was not Sandrine's approach. And it was a little difficult, in fact, working with her on the project to start with. But the more I did work with her, I think the more my respect for her feel for fine naturals, for florals grew. At the same time, I also found that she was willing to look at some of the perhaps newer molecules if they provided a solution. But I found it a fascinating thing. At the end of the day, my tribute to her is that she's deepened my admiration for naturals, my interest in naturals, and I think she's contributed something to my sense of perfumery. I'd like now, if I may, to turn over to Saskia, because Saskia for the last 3 years has had a very deep relationship with Sandrine, and probably the final relationship in her work.
Thank you very much, Michael. And I'd also like to thank Silvio for inviting me to come along, and also Laurence and Sabine to be in such amazing company. I feel very overwhelmed and terribly honoured, especially on Sandrine's behalf. I know that she'd be very touched that this is happening for her. As Michael said, our fragrance was her last, and that was a huge experience that I never anticipated when we when we began working together. Sandrine was very healthy and she was full of life. She had the most amazing sparkly eyes. When she first stepped off the aeroplane, it was the very first thing I noticed about her. This wonderful energy and huge generosity. She really wanted to get submerged in that flower. She'd never seen a Magnolia grandiflora flower before, and it's a very large, luxurious bloom. In fact, here in Milan, I feel like I've been welcomed by magnolias because they're blooming and they're not in Australia. So as soon as I stepped off the plane, I felt like I had a massive welcome by seeing them all flowering in the area. That is my favourite flower, so it was very important to try and put it in a bottle, and Sandrine was very determined to make it an interpretation of the bloom, which initially for me was quite hard because I really expected a solifleur. It is a solifleur, but I really expected a replication, which was quite naive, I think, looking back in retrospect. She made it a lot more beautiful than I had anticipated. To start the process was I was a complete novice, so what Sandrine was to me was a teacher. She was incredibly generous with her time. She always wanted to Skype at any time of the day or night. She had terrific energy for the project. She never tired of it, and to her it was the most important thing, and that was very clear to me when I attended her funeral. Everybody in the community knew all about it, and it was something very much to be celebrated. She opened my senses, so because I work with flowers and have worked with flowers for 25 years, I've always seen them as a very precious object, but now there's even a larger preciousness to them for me. So I see, from her point of view, I see all the different facets of the flower now. They're almost like a prism. I didn't understand that a flower had so many different other components to its fragrance. To me, it was always a lily smelt like a lily, or a violet smelt like a violet. And the first initial impression for her with the magnolia flower was that it was grapefruit. And that to me was terribly foreign. I couldn't even associate that grapefruit could have been a part of the Magnolia grandiflora flower. So she had hard work with me because we were starting right from the very, very beginning. And I'll never be able to explain how her generosity was so hugely appreciated. We went to the shop and we filled it with magnolia blooms. We travelled around Sydney. We looked at every magnolia flower. She came to the market with me. She wanted to smell all the smells at the market and travel in the van and do every single part of my day. We even went to saddleries. We went to all different places that I love, different coffee shops, different friends' places, and cooking and food. And she wanted to get completely submerged in my whole life. She only really wanted to talk to me. She didn't really want any other influence in the project, and that was quite tricky at times. but we worked it out, and we integrated a good team, and eventually, when the fragrance was complete, she encouraged us to go to Paris, which we did, and this is where we met Laurence and Sabine, and we filled that environment with flowers. And at this time Sandrine had become quite ill, but she was determined that we went to the garden of Edmund Rudnicka, and we did make the pilgrimage. It was hard at the time, but she kept insisting it is a true fairy garden. You have to go, you have to see this incredible fairy garden. So we all got on the plane and we travelled down there, and we experienced with Marjorie and Gerard and the team there at Accord and Parfum this wonderful place that she had dreamt of for many, many years because she trained there. So after we left there, in fact, Michel Rudnicka had let us sample a magnolia that he had created, and when Sandrine passed away, Marjorie and Gerard came to Australia for their honeymoon, and Michel actually gifted us, in Sandrine's honour, his Magnolia grandiflora. So that to me showed such wonderful respect and passion, and I was completely overwhelmed. I don't think I've ever received such a generous gift. So the two fragrances were put out together. We repackaged Sandrine's, and they've become a family, and that is a wonderful dedication to her. So that's my story so far with Sandrine. There's plenty more to come. I know that I have many more adventures with her fragrance, and I'm looking forward to all those experiences ahead. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Sabine, may I trust, would you be kind enough to share your thoughts? I think you'd prefer to speak in French.
Oui, je parle en français. C'est plus sensible, surtout pour parler de Sandrine. Sandrine, je trouve que Saskia a bien résumé un des grands talents de Sandrine, et surtout sa raison d'être peut-être sur cette terre, c'était de permettre au plus grand nombre d'accéder à une expression artistique qu'elle rendait vraiment accessible par son intelligence, sa sensibilité, tout ce qu'elle a pu faire autour de la parfumerie. C'était ça, c'était d'ouvrir des fenêtres, de jeter des ponts pour permettre aux gens de rentrer dans son monde finalement. Et elle y a très très bien contribué. Ce que je voudrais dire sur Sandrine, c'est vrai que je l'ai rencontrée à plusieurs reprises, puisque j'étais journaliste et on s'est vus. Et la dernière fois que je l'ai vue, c'était en décembre 2012. On a déjeuné ensemble, comme d'habitude, dans son quartier préféré, c'est-à-dire Saint-Germain-des-Prés. Et on avait parlé de tous ses projets, elle était très enthousiaste et c'était ce qui caractérisait Sandrine. Pour moi, Sandrine, c'est une lumière dans le regard, une lumière dans le sourire, absolument extraordinaire. Et d'ailleurs, on le voit quand on revoit des photos. Et puis, elle m'avait parlé de Magnolia grandiflora. Et en fait, ce qui s'est passé, c'est que effectivement, j'ai rencontré Saskia 6 mois après exactement ce déjeuner. C'était le lancement dans un endroit absolument magique, place des Vosges à Paris, dans un immeuble du XVIIe siècle, absolument ravissant, un appartement immense, rempli de fleurs, rempli de magnolias, c'était absolument inouï, j'avais rarement vu ça. Et on a parlé ensemble, et il y avait Denise Beaulieu qui était là, je me souviens très bien, et on a parlé de Sandrine, et pour être très honnête, nous étions très inquiets à cette période parce qu'elle était malade, très malade, et on se faisait évidemment du souci pour elle. Et ce que je trouve formidable, c'est en rentrant tout à l'heure dans cette pièce où Saskia avait déjà œuvré avec son vapeau, et elle avait mis du parfum absolument partout, et j'ai retrouvé cette impression formidable, et on se disait avec Saskia que le meilleur hommage qu'on puisse rendre à Sandrine, c'est de sentir son parfum et de penser à elle, tout simplement. Voilà.
Thank you very much indeed. Laurence, would you be kind enough to share your thoughts?
Oui, bien sûr. Moi, j'ai connu Sandrine de façon un peu particulière. J'ai un très bon ami de promotion, de classmate, d'école de journalisme, qui est parti travailler en Nouvelle-Calédonie. Il s'appelle Antoine Le Tonneur. Il travaille pour RFO, qui est une radio et une TV française d'outre-mer. Et lorsque je me suis spécialisée en parfum, on avait des contacts de temps en temps parce qu'on a fait des promotions. Je deviens âgée, on a des promotions d'anciens d'école. Et Antoine m'a dit, mais tu te spécialises dans le parfum, j'ai une amie géniale qu'il faut que tu rencontres, qui est en Nouvelle-Calédonie, qui s'appelle Sandrine Videault. Voilà, en fait, mon ami de classe, c'est l'un des meilleurs amis de Nicolas, le mari de Sandrine. Et il se trouve que ça devait être il y a 3 ans ou 4 ans, je ne sais plus. J'ai dû faire un article pour Le Figaro sur le santal de Mysore, d'Australie, et aussi les essais de Robertet, entre autres, en Nouvelle-Calédonie. Et pour cela, j'ai rencontré d'abord Sabine via Skype, et Sandrine Videault par Skype, et elle m'a été d'une grande aide. Elle a été très pédagogique, elle m'a appris beaucoup de choses, et on est petit à petit devenu une sorte de relation amicale par Skype jusqu'à ce qu'elle vienne en France. Il y a 2 ans, 3 ans, je n'ai plus la notion du temps, il y a 2 ans, et là on s'est forgé une sorte d'amitié un peu étonnante dans nos métiers où on parle surtout de business, mais elle était vraiment à part. J'ai découvert quelqu'un qui était féru d'art et qui vivait son métier comme vraiment un métier artistique avant tout. Elle m'a parlé de toutes ses expériences, du kifi, la reproduction du kifi commandé par le Caire, de ses bulles parfumées à la FIAC. Et ensuite, elle m'a beaucoup parlé de Manumalia, qui était son parfum réalisé pour la marque de niche L'aîné, qu'il y a d'ailleurs dans notre livre. C'est pas pour faire de la pub, c'est pour parler de Sandrine. Et elle était très très attachée. En fait, elle était déjà malade et elle voulait que cette marque L'aîné soit dans le livre. Et c'est une petite marque avec très peu de moyens, tenue par René Schifferlet, un Suisse. et qui est sans doute une des marques de niche où il y a le plus une très très belle démarche artistique. Et grâce à Sandrine, j'ai pu vivre, je pense, l'une des plus belles performances artistiques, puisque Sandrine a organisé dans le laboratoire d'Isabelle Doyen, qui est aussi la parfumeuse d'Annie Goutal, mais qui a aussi fait des parfums pour la marque L'Aîné. Donc nous nous sommes retrouvés tout un après-midi, ça a duré de 2h à 7h de l'après-midi, dans le laboratoire d'Isabelle Doyen, avec Sandrine et avec René Schifferlet, qui était venu de Suisse, à sentir des odeurs, à parler d'art, de littérature, et ça c'était Sandrine. Et j'ai vécu, it was priceless, you know. J'ai vécu une aventure extraordinaire comme ça. Ensuite, avec Sandrine, on s'est retrouvés très souvent aussi. Alors nous, notre QG, c'était le La Durée de la rue Bonaparte. Et son dessert préféré, qui est devenu le mien maintenant, c'était Rose Isparon. C'est une glace à la rose, voilà. Et je savais qu'elle était malade, mais elle m'a minimisée. Et évidemment, moi, je l'ai vue les dernières fois, c'était en mai, juste avant qu'elle reparte en Nouvelle-Calédonie, où elle m'a dit qu'elle était guérie, et je l'ai cru. Je suis désolée, mais voilà. Et je crois qu'elle voulait pas qu'on parle plus que ça de sa maladie, mais elle tenait absolument au projet de Saskia et de Grandiflora. Elle m'en a parlé avec beaucoup d'enthousiasme du process créatif avec Saskia, justement, et comment elle s'est attelée à reproduire. Voilà, donc quand je suis allée au lancement aussi, un jour après Sabine de Saskia, c'était extraordinaire, et j'avais l'impression que Sandrine était là, dans la délicatesse de l'exposition des fleurs, dans tout ça. J'étais assez choquée et très triste son mari, Nicolas, sait qu'aujourd'hui il y a un hommage, il en est très fier. Mais il doit élever tout seul sa petite fille, et voilà, je lui ferai un rapport, mais il ne souhaitait pas ajouter quelque chose. Voilà, je vais laisser parler Silvio.
Different perception, different view of a very remarkable woman. Silvio's got an even different side of it. Silvio, would you be kind enough?
Yes, when I know René Schifferle and we know the project, I was completely shocked by how René approached the creativity of these fragrances. I know Isabelle Doyen. It was a surprise to meet her, to know all the reason, and was shocked to know also how Sandrine was involved. And was absolutely a niche brand that burned as a, let me say, an hobby, a passion with absolutely nothing to do with marketing. And I fight with René more time because he's everything but a businessman in this area. And so I started to deal with Sandrine in writing, and finally in 2011 I had the opportunity to meet her. And she shared with me an afternoon, a complete afternoon of having a tea time. And it was magic because she explained me what she had in mind. So we discussed a lot on a new project she would like to have, to start on Renaissance, Florence, etc. And she asked me an help to introduce her with Santa Maria Novella archives, etc. And we share wonderful dreams, and I never had a meeting like that had absolutely nothing to do with business. That was absolutely passion, and also the way Sandrine and Isabella approached the Linnaeus project was based on painting, literature, whatever, but they were simply translating the language of other arts in a perfume, and that was magic. And the last thing I would like to tell is if someone really understands the message of Edmond Rudniska, that is aesthetic in the perfume, a wonderful translation was made by Sandrine in everything she made, and so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you there. How does one sum up the life? What was it that moved her? We were once talking, she came to my apartment in Paris, in the latter stages of the development of Grandiflora Magnolia. And I quoted some quote, and I remember she said, I smell, therefore I am. She giggled at that one, but I think it was true. For her, perfume was not just a smell. Perfume was an installation, it was an art, it was an experience, it was so much more. Sadly, she's left us. But maybe as you go out, there'll be a smell in the air. Perhaps it might be even Sandrine starting to alter the chemistry of heaven. Thank you so much.
And what are you smelling now is exactly Manumalia. Manumalia is a tiare, is a great flower, exactly as is the magnolia. The approach was a flower that is in the Caledonian island. Will and Sandrine share with the inhabitants of Willis Island and other Caledonian, and she tried to translate something that is so magic for them. They live in a completely different manner that is in nature, and he translated a very intense flower. You know, it's not an easy fragrance at all. It's quite complex, full of body, intense, skin-like, I don't know, it is something that you, every time I smell it, I feel myself like a bee. I am coming into the flower.
It's a good way to put it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed.